When billionaire Andrew Jones's card declined for a $2 soda, a 6-year-old's act of kindness saved more than his pride. It saved his life. The summer heat pressed down on Millfield like a suffocating blanket, turning the cracked sidewalks into furnaces that seemed to mock Andrew Jones's Italian leather shoes. He paused outside Murphy's Corner store, wiping sweat from his brow with a handkerchief that probably cost more than most people here made in a week. The irony wasn't lost on him. He'd grown up 3 blocks from this very spot, but now he felt like an alien visiting his own planet. God, when did everything become so small? The bell above the door chimed the same off-key note it had 25 years ago as Andrew stepped inside. The familiar smell of penny candy and floor wax transported him back to afternoons spent counting nickels for a candy bar. But those memories felt like someone else's life now. "Just a Coke," he said to the elderly store owner, a weathered black man whose kind eyes seemed to see right through Andrew's expensive facade. "That'll be $2.50, the man said, his voice carrying the gentle authority of someone who'd been serving this community for decades. Andrew pulled out his platinum card with practiced confidence. The same confidence that had closed billion-dollar deals, that had made grown men in boardrooms lean forward when he spoke. He slid it across the counter like he'd done thousands of times before. The card reader beeped, then beeped again. "Declined." "Let me try that again for you," the store owner said kindly, running the card a second time. "Declined." "Hi, my beautiful family. Let me begin with a prayer straight from the heart. Dear God, please bless every soul watching this video. Fill their lives with peace, joy, and endless love. Amen. Welcome back, my family. You are not just viewers. You are my light during the dark days, and my reason to keep going. To all new family members, welcome to the family. Please subscribe to the channel and introduce yourself in the comments. I truly want to know more about you. My beloved family, every story I bring is not just words. It is my sweat, my sleepless nights, and my sacrifice. When you leave early, it cuts deep as if my hard work is unseen and my voice unheard. Please stay till the end. I love you. Now let's begin the story. Andrew's chest tightened. Behind him, he could hear the whispers starting, a sound that cut deeper than any boardroom criticism ever could. "Look at Mr. Fancy Pants." A woman's voice drifted from the back of the store. "All dressed up with nowhere to go. Probably one of them fake rich folks," another voice added. "You see it on the news all the time." Heat crawled up Andrew's neck, and it had nothing to do with the summer temperature. He fumbled for his wallet, his fingers suddenly clumsy. "I have another card." "Declined," came the mechanical response again. The whispers grew louder. 20 pairs of eyes felt like searchlights, each gaze a reminder of how far he'd fallen in the span of 60 seconds. This was his nightmare. Not poverty, not failure, but public humiliation in the place where his story began. "I can try calling the bank," Andrew said, his voice smaller than it had been in years. But even as he reached for his phone, he wondered, what if it wasn't a mistake? What if everything he'd built was crashing down right here, right now, in front of everyone? That's when she appeared. A tiny figure stepped forward from behind a display of chips, her dark eyes serious beyond her 6 years. She wore a faded purple dress that had seen better days, her hair pulled back in careful braids that spoke of a mother's love despite obvious financial struggles. "I got it, mister," she said simply, placing a crumpled $5 bill on the counter with the solemnity of a judge passing sentence. The store fell silent. Even the whispers died. Andrew stared down at this child who couldn't have weighed more than 50 pounds, whose entire worldly possessions probably wouldn't fill his walk-in closet, offering to save him from his embarrassment. "Sweetheart, you don't need to," he began. The store owner, His nameplate read Ernest. Smiled as he accepted the little girl's money. That's mighty kind of you, Zoe. Andrew felt something crack inside his chest. Not break, crack. Like the first fissure in a dam that's been holding back too much pressure for too long. When was the last time someone helped me without wanting something in return? Thank you, he whispered, his voice rough. But I insist on paying you back. What's your name? Where do you live? I want to thank your parents properly. Zoe tilted her head, studying him with those impossibly wise eyes. You don't got to pay me back, mister. But maybe. She paused, seeming to consider something important. Maybe you could remember how it feels to need help. My mama says rich folks sometimes forget. Before Andrew could respond, before he could process the profound simplicity of her words, Zoe was moving toward the door. Wait, Andrew called, but she was already outside, disappearing into the maze of afternoon shadows between buildings like she'd never been there at all. He stood frozen, clutching the cold Coke, feeling like he'd just witnessed something miraculous and terrible at the same time. Andrew stood on the sidewalk outside Murphy's corner store, the Coke sweating in his palm as he scanned the street for any sign of Zoe. The afternoon sun beat down mercilessly, but something cold had settled in his stomach, a premonition he couldn't shake. His phone buzzed. Marcus Whitfield, his business partner of 8 years. Andrew, where the hell are you? Marcus's voice crackled through the speaker, tight with what sounded like concern. You missed our 3 o'clock with the investors. I'm in Millfield, checking out the properties we discussed. Andrew kept walking, his eyes searching every doorway, every alley. Marcus, something's wrong with my cards. All of them declined. A pause. Too long. Probably just a bank glitch, Marcus said finally. You know how these things go. Listen, get back to the Grandview Hotel. We need to discuss the acquisition strategy tonight. Room 412, like we planned. Andrew stopped walking. In 8 years of partnership, Marcus had never once forgotten a detail. But they'd agreed on room 415, not 412. Right, Andrew said slowly. Room 412. Perfect. And Andrew? Don't go wandering around that neighborhood too long. It's not safe for someone like you. The line went dead. Andrew stared at his phone, that cold feeling in his stomach spreading to his chest. In all their years together, Marcus had never shown concern for Andrew's safety. If anything, he'd always been the one pushing Andrew to take bigger risks, make bolder moves. Something's not right. But first, he had to find Zoe. Andrew spent the next hour combing the neighborhood, stopping everyone who would talk to him. Most people looked at his expensive clothes with suspicion, but a few older residents remembered him from his childhood. None had seen a little girl matching Zoe's description. As the sun began to sink toward the horizon, painting the rundown buildings in shades of gold and amber, Andrew found himself standing in front of his old apartment building. The same cracked steps where he'd sat doing homework. The same rusted fire escape where he'd dreamed of escape. Maybe you could remember how it feels to need help. Zoe's words echoed in his mind. When had he stopped seeing people as individuals and started seeing them as obstacles or opportunities? When had success become a wall between him and his humanity? His phone buzzed again. This time, it wasn't Marcus. Mr. Jones? The voice was unfamiliar, professional. This is Detective Rivera with the Metropolitan Police. We need to speak with you immediately about your business partner, Marcus Whitfield. Andrew's blood went cold. What about Marcus? Sir, I can't discuss this over the phone. Can you meet us at the Grandview Hotel? We'll be in the lobby in 20 minutes. The Grandview? That's where I'm supposed to meet Marcus tonight. Another pause. Sir, Marcus Whitfield is currently in federal custody. He has been for the past 3 hours. The world tilted. Andrew grabbed the nearest wall for support. That's impossible. I just talked to him. Mr. Jones, someone has been impersonating your partner. We have reason to believe your life is in immediate danger. Do not, under any circumstances, go to your hotel room. Andrew's mind reeled. If Marcus was in custody, who had he been talking to? And why did they want him in room 412? Room 412, not 415. Detective, I think someone just tried to lure me into a trap. Where are you right now, Mr. Jones? Millfield. My old neighborhood. Andrew was already moving, his instincts screaming at him to get somewhere public, somewhere safe. Stay exactly where you are. We're sending units to your location. But Andrew couldn't stay still. The pieces were falling into place with terrifying clarity. His cards hadn't malfunctioned. They'd been deliberately disabled. Someone had wanted him stranded, vulnerable, forced to return to the hotel where what? What was waiting for him in room 412? His phone rang again. Unknown number. Against every instinct, he answered. Andrew. The voice was calm, cold. Definitely not Marcus, but someone trying to sound like him. You're late for our meeting. Who is this? A low chuckle. Someone who's been waiting a very long time to have a conversation with you. Your partner has been quite the talker, you know. Very helpful in explaining your routines, your habits. Did you really think you could destroy people's lives without consequences? I don't know what you're talking about. The Riverside Project, Andrew. Does that ring a bell? 43 families displaced. Promises broken. Lives ruined. The voice grew harder. My brother was one of those families. Andrew remembered the Riverside Project. One of his early developments, 5 years ago. There had been complications, legal challenges from residents who'd refused to sell. But it had all been handled legally, through proper channels. Marcus told us how you really handled the holdouts, the voice continued. The bribes, the intimidation, the mysterious accidents that convince people to sell. Very creative. That's not. I never authorized. But even as Andrew protested, memories were surfacing. Marcus handling the difficult negotiations. Marcus assuring him that everything was taken care of. Andrew choosing not to ask too many questions, because the results spoke for themselves. You built your empire on other people's suffering, Andrew. Tonight, you pay for that. The line went dead. Andrew stood in the middle of the street, his past and present colliding with the force of a freight train. Everything Marcus had done, he'd done in Andrew's name. And Andrew had let him, as long as the profits kept rolling in. How many families had been destroyed by his willful blindness? But before he could process the full weight of his guilt, he heard it. The squeal of tires, the roar of engines. 2 black SUVs were racing down the street toward him. Andrew ran. What do you think is more dangerous for Andrew right now? The assassins hunting him, or the truth about what his success really cost? Let me know in the comments. He ducked into the first alley he could find, his expensive shoes slipping on loose gravel. Behind him, car doors slammed, voices shouted. They were coming after him on foot now. His lungs burned as he vaulted over a chain-link fence, tearing his suit jacket in the process. The irony wasn't lost on him. He was running for his life through the same streets where he'd once felt trapped by poverty. The sound of pursuit grew closer. Andrew zigzagged through the maze of alleys and side streets, muscle memory from his childhood guiding him through shortcuts he hadn't used in decades. That's when he saw it. Murphy's Corner Store, its neon sign flickering like a beacon. Ernest was just locking up when Andrew burst through the door, wild-eyed and gasping. Please, Andrew panted. I need help. There are men. They're trying to kill me. Ernest took one look at Andrew's torn clothes and terrified face, then quickly locked the door and flipped off the lights. Back room, Ernest whispered. Now, They crouched in the darkness between shelves of canned goods, listening to footsteps on the sidewalk outside, voices calling out in languages Andrew couldn't identify. "Why are they after you?" Ernest whispered. Andrew's throat felt raw. "Because I forgot who I used to be. Because I let someone do terrible things in my name. Because—" his voice cracked. "Because I became exactly the kind of person I used to hate." Ernest studied him in the dim light filtering through the back window. "Sometimes," the old man said quietly, "it takes hitting rock bottom to remember which way is up." Outside, the voices faded. The footsteps moved away. But Andrew knew they'd be back. And now he understood why his cards had been disabled. They wanted him isolated, desperate, exactly where he was right now. The only question was, would the police find him before the assassins did? Ernest handed Andrew a bottle of water and a towel to clean the blood from where he'd scraped his hands on the fence. In the dim light of the back room, surrounded by boxes of inventory and the smell of old wood, Andrew felt more vulnerable than he had in 20 years. "Those men," Ernest said quietly, peering through the blinds. "They're still out there. Different car now, but they're waiting." Andrew's hands shook as he took a sip of water. "Ernest, I need to ask you something. The little girl who paid for my drink, Zoe. Do you know where she lives?" The old man's expression shifted, something protective flickering in his eyes. "Why you want to know?" "Because she saved my life today, and she doesn't even know it." Andrew's voice was raw with exhaustion. "If I hadn't been here, looking for her, I would have been in that hotel room when—" He didn't finish the sentence. Ernest studied him for a long moment. "Zoe Washington. Lives with her mama, Diana, about 6 blocks from here. Sweet child. Lost her daddy 2 years ago. Washington." The name hit Andrew like a physical blow. "Her father," Andrew said slowly. "What was his name?" "Detective James Washington. Good man. Was investigating some big corporate conspiracy when he got killed in what they called a random carjacking." Ernest's voice carried years of skepticism. "Nothing random about it, if you ask me. That man was getting too close to something dangerous." The room started spinning. Andrew gripped the edge of a cardboard box, his knuckles white. Detective James Washington. The name was burned into his memory from 2 years ago. A police detective who'd been asking uncomfortable questions about the Riverside project. Marcus had assured him the investigation would go away naturally. "Oh God, what did Marcus do?" "You look like you've seen a ghost," Ernest observed. "I think I have." Andrew's voice was barely a whisper. "Ernest, that little girl, her father was investigating my company when he died." Before Ernest could respond, Andrew's phone rang. "Unknown number." Against every instinct, he answered. "Andrew." Marcus's voice, but different somehow. Colder. "You're not in your hotel room." "Marcus? Where are you?" "The police said you were in custody." A harsh laugh. "The police don't have me, Andrew. But they're going to find your body in about an hour. And when they do, they'll discover evidence that you've been running a massive corruption scheme. Bribes, intimidation, even murder." Andrew's blood turned to ice. "What are you talking about?" "The Riverside project was just the beginning. I've been building a case against you for years. Bank records, forged documents, testimony from victims of your crimes. When you're found dead tonight, the whole world will know what a monster Andrew Jones really was." "You're insane." "Why would you?" "Because you were supposed to stay stupid and grateful. You were supposed to keep signing papers and asking no questions while I built something real. But lately, you've been getting curious, asking about details. I couldn't risk you discovering the truth." The truth. Andrew realized with growing horror that he didn't even know what the truth was anymore. "The families from Riverside," Andrew said slowly. "What really happened to them? What do you think happened? They wouldn't sell, so I made them disappear. Some moved away after their businesses mysteriously failed. Others had accidents. And Detective Washington? He was getting too close to connecting me to all of it. Andrew felt sick. You had him killed. I had him removed. Just like I'm removing you. The only difference is, you're going to die a villain. The line went dead. Ernest was watching Andrew's face with growing concern. Son, you look like death itself. Because I might be. Andrew's voice was hollow. Ernest, I need to get to Diana Washington. If Marcus has been framing me, she might have evidence that could clear my name. Her husband was investigating this. Diana don't talk to strangers much. Not since James died. She's protective of Zoe, keeps to herself. Then I need you to call her. Tell her Andrew Jones needs to see her. Tell her it's about her husband's investigation. Ernest hesitated. I don't know. Please. Andrew grabbed the old man's arm. That little girl saved my life today. Let me try to save hers. Because if Marcus is willing to kill me to cover this up, he won't hesitate to hurt anyone who gets in his way. The lights went out. In the sudden darkness, Andrew heard the front door rattling. Someone was trying to get in. Back door, Ernest whispered, but as they moved through the store, Andrew heard something that made his heart stop. Glass breaking. Multiple entry points. These weren't random thugs. This was a coordinated assault. Federal agents. A voice boomed from the front of the store. Andrew Jones, we have a warrant for your arrest. But Andrew had heard enough fake authority for one day. Real federal agents didn't break windows and storm buildings without backup. This way, Ernest whispered, guiding him toward a hidden exit behind a false wall of shelving. They slipped into the alley just as flashlight beams began sweeping the store's interior. Andrew could hear them tearing the place apart, searching for him with systematic precision. They're not going to give up, Andrew breathed. Then we better get you somewhere safe. Ernest was already moving, leading Andrew through a maze of back alleys that seemed to exist in the shadows between the visible city. 10 minutes later, they stood in front of a modest duplex with a small front yard where a tire swing hung from an old oak tree. Warm light glowed from behind curtains, and Andrew could hear the faint sound of a television. That's Diana's place, Ernest said. But Andrew, she ain't gonna want to see you. In her mind, your company killed her husband. Maybe it did. Andrew's voice was quiet. But I need to know the truth. And I think she's the only one who can tell me. Ernest knocked on the door. After a moment, it opened to reveal a woman in her early 30s with kind eyes that held depths of sorrow. She was beautiful in an understated way, her natural hair pulled back, wearing scrubs that suggested she'd just come home from work. Ernest, what are you doing here so late? Diana Washington's voice carried a musical quality that reminded Andrew of her daughter. Diana, this is Andrew Jones. He needs to talk to you about James. The warmth vanished from Diana's face instantly. Her hand moved instinctively toward the door, ready to slam it shut. I know who you are, she said, her voice like ice. You're the man whose company destroyed 43 families. The man my husband died trying to stop. Ma'am, I think your husband may have discovered that I was being framed. I think he found evidence that could prove my innocence and get justice for his murder. Diana's eyes flashed with anger. Justice? You want to talk about justice? My daughter asks me every night when Daddy's coming home, and I have to tell her never, because men like you. Mama? Zoe appeared in the doorway, rubbing sleepy eyes. When she saw Andrew, her face lit up with innocent joy. It's the nice man from the store. The recognition that passed over Diana's face was like watching pieces of a puzzle slam together. Her daughter had helped this man, the man she blamed for her husband's death. Zoe, go back to bed, baby. Diana said softly, never taking her eyes off Andrew. But Mama, he's the one I told you about. The one whose money didn't work, so I helped him. Diana's face went through a series of emotions, confusion, realization, and finally, a grudging curiosity. You, she said slowly. You're the man Zoe helped today. Your daughter saved my life, Mrs. Washington. In more ways than one. Diana looked between Andrew and Ernest, then down at Zoe, who was beaming up at Andrew like he was a long-lost friend. 5 minutes, Diana said finally, stepping aside. But if you're here to threaten us, or by my silence, I'm here because I think your husband discovered something that could save both our families, Andrew said as he stepped inside. The living room was modest but warm, filled with pictures of a happy family. James Washington had been a tall, serious-looking man with kind eyes. The kind of cop who became a detective because he genuinely wanted to help people. Diana noticed Andrew studying the photos. He was a good man. The best man I ever knew. What was he investigating when he died? Everything. Diana's voice was bitter. Your Riverside project was just the tip of the iceberg. James found connections to human trafficking, money laundering, political corruption. He said your company was at the center of a web that stretched into city government, the police force, even the federal judiciary. Andrew felt the world shift beneath his feet. Mrs. Washington, I swear to you, I didn't know about any of that. Then you're either a liar or a fool. I was a fool, Andrew admitted. I let Marcus handle everything while I focused on profits. But your husband, did he find any evidence that I wasn't involved? Diana stared at him for a long moment, then walked to a bookshelf and pulled out what looked like a photo album. But when she opened it, Andrew saw it was hollow inside, containing a flash drive and several manila folders. James hid this before he died. He said if anything happened to him, I should give it to someone who could get justice. But I never knew who to trust. She handed Andrew one of the folders. Maybe you should see what he really found. Andrew opened the folder with trembling hands. Inside were bank records, photographs, surveillance reports, a comprehensive investigation into Marcus Whitfield's criminal network. And on the first page, in Detective Washington's careful handwriting, was a note that made Andrew's knees buckle. Andrew Jones appears to be an unwitting front for Whitfield's operations. All evidence suggests Jones has no knowledge of criminal activities. Recommend protective custody for Jones when arrests are made. Whitfield has shown willingness to eliminate threats. Jones may be next target if he discovers the truth. Andrew stared at Detective Washington's handwritten notes, the words blurring as the full scope of his situation crystallized. He wasn't just being hunted. He was being systematically destroyed by the one person he'd trusted most. There's more, Diana said quietly, pulling out another folder. James documented everything. The bribes Marcus paid to city officials, the intimidation tactics, the shell companies used to launder money. Look at this. She showed him a photograph of Marcus shaking hands with a man Andrew didn't recognize outside a warehouse. The timestamp showed it was taken 3 days after the Riverside families had voluntarily sold their properties. That's Vincent Kozlov, Diana explained. Human trafficker. James tracked shipments going through your construction sites to that warehouse. Women and children, Andrew. Marcus was using your company's legitimate operations to move people. Andrew felt physically sick. How many? At least 200 that James could document. Maybe more. Diana's voice was steady, but Andrew could see the pain in her eyes. Your company trucks, your security clearances, your reputation. Marcus used all of it. Why didn't your husband arrest him? He was going to. James had enough evidence to bring down Marcus and half the city government. He was supposed to meet with federal prosecutors the day after he died. Andrew looked up from the files. Mrs. Washington. Diana, I know this doesn't change anything, but I need you to know, I would never have been part of this if I'd known. Never. Diana studied his face for a long moment. I believe you. James wrote that he thought you were just a convenient fool. But Andrew. She paused, choosing her words carefully. Being innocent doesn't make you blameless. You chose not to ask questions when you should have. The truth of it hit harder than any accusation could have. Andrew had been willfully blind, seduced by success into ignoring the warning signs that something wasn't right. How do I fix this? He asked quietly. You help me finish what James started. Before Andrew could respond, his phone rang. The caller ID showed his office number. Don't answer that, Diana said sharply. But Andrew was already accepting the call. Hello. Mr. Jones? It was Rebecca, his secretary. But her voice was wrong, too tight, too controlled. Mr. Whitfield needs you to come to the office immediately. There's been an emergency with the Singapore deal. Andrew met Diana's eyes and put the phone on speaker. What kind of emergency, Rebecca? I can't discuss it over the phone, sir. Mr. Whitfield is very concerned about security leaks. Where is Marcus now? A pause. He's right here, Mr. Jones. Please hurry. The line went dead. She's in trouble, Andrew said immediately. Marcus has her. Diana was already moving, gathering the files and flash drives. We need to get out of here. If Marcus knows you're alive and loose, he'll come for anyone who might help you. Where's Zoe? Spending the night at my sister's, thank God. Diana was stuffing the evidence into a backpack. Andrew, listen to me carefully. James had a contact at the FBI, Agent Sarah Chun. She was the only one he trusted with this case. We need to get this evidence to her. As if summoned by her words, Andrew's phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Your secretary is alive for now. Pier 19, Warehouse 7. Come alone, or she dies like the detective did. You have 1 hour. Andrew showed Diana the message. Her face went pale. It's a trap. He's going to kill you both. Maybe. But I can't let Rebecca die because of my mistakes. Andrew looked at the evidence spread across Diana's coffee table. Can you get this to Agent Chen? Not without you. James's notes say Marcus has people everywhere. Police, FBI, city government. The only person who can verify this evidence is you. Andrew ran his hands through his hair, thinking frantically. Every option seemed to lead to death. His, Rebecca's, or both. There's another way, Diana said slowly. We go together, but not to surrender. James mapped out all of Marcus's operations. If we can get close to that warehouse, we might be able to gather enough evidence to bring him down publicly. That's insane. We're not cops, we're people who've lost everything to Marcus Whitfield. Diana interrupted, her voice fierce. I lost my husband. You're about to lose your life and your reputation. At some point, you have to decide whether you're going to keep running or start fighting. Andrew looked at this woman, this widow whose husband had died trying to expose the truth, whose 6-year-old daughter had shown him more grace than he deserved. She was right. Running hadn't saved him yet. What do you need me to do? Diana smiled grimly and pulled out her phone. First, we're going to call in some backup. James wasn't the only good cop in this city. She dialed a number and waited. Tony, it's Diana Washington. I need a favor, a big one. While Diana spoke in hushed tones to her late husband's former partner, Andrew studied the files again. The scope of Marcus's operation was staggering. Not just the Riverside project, but developments across 3 states, all connected by a web of shell companies and corrupted officials. And at the center of it all was Andrew Jones's signature on dozens of documents he'd never read carefully. Tony's going to meet us near the warehouse, Diana said, ending her call. He's bringing evidence from other cases that connect to James's investigation. But Andrew, there's something else you need to know. She pulled out a final folder, this one thinner than the others. Marcus didn't just use your company for trafficking. He's been embezzling from your accounts for years. According to James's investigation, you should be broke by now. Andrew frowned. That's impossible. I check my accounts regularly. Do you? Or do you check reports that Marcus's people prepare for you? The question hit Andrew like cold water. When was the last time he'd actually logged into his own bank accounts? Reviewed his own financial statements without Marcus's summaries? He pulled out his phone and opened his banking app, his fingers trembling as he navigated to his primary business account. The balance showed $847.32. That's... Andrew stared at the screen in disbelief. There should be 40 million in that account. Diana nodded grimly. James found evidence of systematic transfers to offshore accounts. Marcus has been slowly draining your wealth while building evidence that you've been funding illegal activities. The complete picture finally clicked into place. Marcus hadn't just been using Andrew's company. He'd been systematically destroying Andrew's life, positioning him to take the fall for everything. He was never going to let me live, Andrew realized. Even if I'd gone to the hotel tonight, even if I'd played along, I was always going to end up dead or in prison. Which is why we're going to stop him. Diana stood, slinging the backpack over her shoulder. James died believing that good people could win if they had the courage to fight. Let's prove him right. As they prepared to leave, Andrew caught Diana's arm. Why are you helping me? You have every reason to hate me. Diana looked back at the photos of her husband covering the walls, then at a picture of Zoe on the mantel. A bright, smiling little girl who still believed the world was full of people worth saving. Because Zoe saw something good in you today. And because James always said the measure of a person isn't the mistakes they make, but what they do when they realize they've made them. She headed for the door, then paused. Besides, she added with a slight smile, you're about to help me get justice for the man I loved. That's worth something. Andrew followed her into the night, but as they reached her car, his phone rang again. This time, the caller ID made his blood freeze. It was Zoe. Diana saw the screen and immediately answered. Baby, what's wrong? You should be asleep at Aunt Lisa's. Zoe's voice came through the speaker, small and frightened. Mama, there are men here. They say they need to talk to you about the nice man from the store. Aunt Lisa is crying. Diana's face went white. Andrew grabbed the phone. Zoe, honey, it's Andrew. Are you somewhere safe? I'm hiding in the closet like Daddy taught me. But Mama, I'm scared. Marcus's voice suddenly came through the phone, cold and triumphant. Hello, Andrew. Change of plans. Pier 19 is off the table. You and Mrs. Washington have 30 minutes to get to 1247, Cedar Street, or little Zoe joins her father. The line went dead. Diana was already running to her car. Cedar Street is across town. We'll never make it in 30 minutes. Andrew was right behind her. Then we better drive fast. As they peeled out of the driveway, Andrew realized that Marcus had just made his first real mistake. By threatening Zoe, he'd crossed the one line that would unite Andrew and Diana completely. The hunt was about to become a war. Diana's car screamed through the empty streets, her hands gripping the wheel so tightly her knuckles had gone white. Andrew was on his phone, frantically calling every contact he had, trying to piece together a plan that wouldn't get them all killed. Tony, where are you? Andrew barked into the phone as they took a corner at dangerous speed. 5 minutes out from Cedar Street came the gruff voice of Detective Tony Martinez, James Washington's former partner. But Andrew, this whole area is industrial. Lots of places to hide bodies. Don't say that, Diana whispered, her voice breaking slightly. Andrew reached over and squeezed her shoulder. We're going to get Zoe back. I promise you that. You can't promise that, Diana said, but there was something in her voice, not just fear, but determination. But we're going to try anyway. Andrew's phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. 12:47, Cedar Street. Back entrance. Come alone, or the child dies, screaming like her father did. He's trying to get under our skin, Andrew said, showing Diana the message. Make us emotional, make us sloppy. It's working. Diana's voice was ice cold now, and Andrew recognized something dangerous in her tone. This wasn't just a grieving widow anymore. This was a mother whose child was in danger. They pulled onto Cedar Street, a desolate stretch of warehouses and abandoned storefronts that looked like the perfect place for people to disappear. Number 1247 was a 3-story building with boarded windows and a rusted fire escape zigzagging up its face. There, Diana pointed to an alley beside the building. Tony's car. Detective Martinez emerged from the shadows as they parked, his service weapon drawn, but held low. He was a stocky man in his 50s with the weathered look of a cop who'd seen too much. This is insane, he said without preamble. We should call for backup, surround the building. There's no time, Diana interrupted. And Marcus has people everywhere. How do we know backup won't include some of his corrupt cops? Tony's expression darkened. Because James wasn't the only good cop Marcus killed. I've been working this case for 2 years, trying to find enough evidence to bring him down safely. But if he has the kid, then we end this tonight, Andrew said. What do we know about the building? Tony pulled out a tablet, showing them building schematics. 3 floors, multiple entrances, but the back door is the only one that's not chained shut. If they're holding the girl, she's probably on the 2nd floor, far enough from the street that no one can hear her scream, but close enough to the exits for a quick escape. Andrew studied the layout, his mind racing. What if we don't go in the back door? What do you mean? Marcus expects us to follow orders, walk into his trap like good little victims. But what if we come from above? Andrew pointed to the fire escape. Diana, you and Tony go up the fire escape to the 3rd floor. I'll go through the back door like Marcus expects. That's suicide, Diana protested. No, that's misdirection. While Marcus is focused on me, you two find Zoe and get her out. Then we worry about the evidence. Tony shook his head. Andrew, you don't understand. Marcus isn't just going to kill you. He's going to make you confess to everything first. Probably record it. Use it to close the book on all his crimes. Then let him try. Andrew's voice was grim. I've spent my whole adult life building a reputation. Maybe it's time to tear it down for something that actually matters. Before anyone could argue further, Andrew's phone rang. Marcus again. You're late, Andrew. And I can see 3 people in that alley when I specifically said come alone. They looked around frantically. Where was Marcus watching from? Let me talk to Zoe, Andrew demanded. Uncle Andrew? Zoe's voice was small, scared, but she was trying to be brave. Are you coming to help me? The fact that she called him uncle nearly broke Andrew's heart. I'm here, sweetheart. Is Aunt Lisa okay? She's sleeping. The man said she was very tired. Drugged, Andrew realized. Or worse. Marcus came back on the line. Touching reunion. Now, here's what's going to happen. You're going to walk through that back door with your hands up. Your friends are going to leave. And then you and I are going to have a very honest conversation about your crimes. What guarantee do I have that you'll let Zoe go? Marcus laughed. The same guarantee James Washington had that he'd live to see his daughter grow up. But if you cooperate, maybe the child will have a quicker death than her father did. The line went dead. Diana was shaking with rage. He just admitted to murdering James. And he's going to admit to a lot more before this night is over, Andrew said. Tony, are you recording this? The detective held up his phone. Every word. But it won't matter if we're all dead. Andrew pulled out his own phone and began typing rapidly. I'm uploading copies of all the evidence to a cloud server. If something happens to us, it automatically gets sent to every major news outlet and law enforcement agency in the country. Including the corrupt ones, Tony pointed out. Then we better make sure some of us survive to explain which ones are which. Andrew finished the upload and looked at Diana. I need you to promise me something. What? If this goes bad, if Marcus gets me, you take Zoe and run. Don't try to be a hero, don't try to save me. Just get her somewhere safe and make sure the world knows the truth. Diana stared at him for a long moment. You know what James wrote about you in his final report? Andrew shook his head. He said you were the kind of man who could be redeemed if someone gave you a reason to try. She checked her service weapon. Andrew was surprised to see she was armed. Let's give you that chance. As they prepared to split up, Tony grabbed Andrew's arm. There's something else you need to know. Marcus isn't working alone in there. We've identified at least 3 other vehicles in the area. Professionals. This isn't just about killing you quietly anymore. This is about sending a message. What kind of message? That anyone who threatens Marcus Whitfield's operation ends up dead, along with their families. The implication hung heavy in the air. This wasn't just about Andrew anymore. It was about everyone who might ever consider crossing Marcus. Then we send a different message, Andrew said. We show the world that Marcus Whitfield isn't untouchable. Diana was already moving toward the fire escape. 5 minutes, she said. Give us 5 minutes to get in position, then make your entrance. As Andrew watched her disappear into the shadows with Tony, he felt something he hadn't experienced in years. The kind of fear that came from having something worth losing. Not money, not reputation, but the respect of people who mattered. He thought about Zoe's small hand placing that crumpled $5 bill on the counter, her innocent belief that helping someone in trouble was just what you did. His phone buzzed. A text from Diana. In position. Zoe's location confirmed. 2nd floor, northeast corner. 3 hostels visible, plus Marcus. Be careful. Andrew took a deep breath and walked toward the back door of 1247 Cedar Street. Behind him, the city lights twinkled like distant stars. Ahead of him waited either redemption or destruction. The back door was unlocked. Andrew pushed it open and stepped into darkness, his hands raised. I'm here, Marcus, he called out. Let's finish this. From somewhere above him came the sound of slow, mocking applause. Welcome to your execution, Andrew. I hope you've made peace with your God, because you're about to meet him. But as Andrew climbed the stairs toward his confrontation with Marcus Whitfield, he realized something had fundamentally changed. For the first time in years, he wasn't afraid of losing everything. He was afraid of failing the people who'd chosen to believe in him. And that made all the difference. The stairs creaked under Andrew's weight as he climbed toward the 2nd floor, each step echoing in the hollow silence of the abandoned building. Dim light filtered down from above, casting long shadows that seemed to reach for him like grasping fingers. That's far enough, Marcus's voice called from the darkness above. Stop right there. Andrew froze halfway up the staircase. Through the gloom, he could make out Marcus's silhouette on the landing above. Expensive suit immaculate despite the circumstances. That same confident posture Andrew had admired for 8 years. Where's Zoe? Andrew called out. Safe. For now. Marcus stepped into a pool of light from a broken window, and Andrew was shocked by what he saw. His partner's face was haggard, eyes wild with something between desperation and manic triumph. But her safety depends entirely on how cooperative you're willing to be. What do you want, Marcus? I want you to confess. Marcus held up a video camera. I want you to tell the world how Andrew Jones built his empire on the backs of human trafficking, drug smuggling, and murder. I want you to take responsibility for every life I've destroyed in your name. Andrew felt a chill that had nothing to do with the building's drafty interior. And if I don't, then little Zoe learns what it feels like to lose a parent. Again, the casual cruelty of it made Andrew's stomach turn. This wasn't the man he'd known for 8 years. Or maybe it was, and Andrew had simply refused to see it. How long? Andrew asked, taking another step up. How long have you been planning this? Marcus smiled, but it was empty of warmth. From the beginning, Andrew. From the very first day we met. The words hit Andrew like a physical blow. That's impossible. We built the company together. You built nothing, Marcus snarled. You were a useful idiot with just enough money to be legitimate and just enough naivety to never ask the right questions. Do you know why I chose you? Andrew said nothing, but Marcus continued anyway. Because you were desperate. A nobody from nowhere with big dreams and small means. The perfect front man for everything I had planned. Marcus began pacing, the camera still trained on Andrew. I researched you for months before our chance meeting. I knew exactly what buttons to push, exactly how to make you feel important while keeping you ignorant. Another step up the stairs. Andrew could see a hallway stretching behind Marcus, doors leading to various rooms. Somewhere in this building, Zoe was waiting for rescue. The Riverside Project, Andrew said. Tell me what really happened to those families. You want the truth? Marcus laughed, but it was a broken sound. The truth is that those families were just the beginning. I've moved over 300 people through your construction sites in the past 5 years. Women, children, desperate people who thought they were being smuggled to freedom. Where did they end up? Where do you think? Marcus's eyes glittered with malice. Labor camps, brothels, organ harvesting operations. Your trucks, your security clearances, your reputation. It made everything so much easier. Andrew felt bile rise in his throat. I would never have. Agreed? No, probably not. But you benefited from it all the same. Every dollar in your account, every success story in the press, it was all built on human misery. Marcus held up a thick folder. I have documentation of every transaction, every shipment, every death. And your signature is on all the paperwork. Forged signatures. Prove it. Marcus's smile was predatory. Better yet, explain to the families of the victims why it matters. Do you think they care whether you knew or not? Do you think the parents of murdered children will forgive you just because you were too stupid to realize what was happening? The psychological assault was working. Andrew could feel doubt creeping in, the weight of willful ignorance crushing down on him. How many red flags had he ignored? How many times had Marcus provided convenient explanations for things that didn't quite add up? But then he thought of Detective James Washington, murdered for trying to expose the truth. Of Diana, who'd lost her husband but still chose to fight. Of 6-year-old Zoe, who'd seen a stranger in trouble and helped without hesitation. You're right, Andrew said, taking another step. I am responsible. I chose to look the other way when I should have asked questions. I chose profits over people. But that doesn't make me a murderer, Marcus. That makes you one. Semantics, Marcus spat. The dead don't care about your intentions. Maybe not. But the living do. Andrew pulled out his phone. And they're going to care very much about this conversation. Marcus's face went pale. What did you do? I've been recording everything. And it's being live-streamed to a secure server. Andrew's voice grew stronger with each word. Every confession you just made, every detail about the trafficking operation, every admission of murder. It's all documented now. For the first time since Andrew had known him, Marcus Whitfield looked genuinely frightened. You're bluffing. Am I? Andrew held up his phone, showing the recording app with its steadily climbing viewer count. Turns out Detective Washington wasn't the only one keeping records. He had contacts in the FBI, the state police, even some federal prosecutors. They've been monitoring Marcus Whitfield for months, waiting for enough evidence to move. It was partly true. Tony had contacts, and they had been building a case. But Andrew was gambling that Marcus's paranoia would fill in the gaps. Even if that's true, Marcus said, but his voice was shaking now. You'll never leave this building alive. And neither will the girl. That's where you're wrong. The voice came from behind Marcus. Diana stepped out of the shadows, her service weapon trained on Marcus's head. Behind her, Tony emerged from another doorway, his own gun drawn. Diana Washington, Marcus said, turning slowly. The grieving widow. How poetic. Drop the camera, Diana ordered, her voice steady as stone. Marcus smiled and let the camera fall to the floor, where it shattered. It doesn't matter. I have copies of everything. Insurance policies. Where's my daughter? Room 237. Tony called from down the hall. She's okay. Scared but okay. Lisa Martinez is with her, also alive but sedated. Relief flooded through Andrew, but he kept his focus on Marcus. Something was wrong. The man was too calm, too confident for someone whose entire operation had just been exposed. You know what the beautiful thing about having corrupt cops on my payroll is? Marcus said conversationally. They're very good at cleaning up messes. Before anyone could react, the building's lights went out. In the sudden darkness, Andrew heard Marcus move, heard Diana shout a warning, heard the sound of footsteps pounding up the stairs behind him. Backup. Marcus's backup had arrived. Gunfire erupted in the hallway. Muzzle flashes lit up the darkness like deadly fireworks. Andrew threw himself against the wall, his heart hammering as bullets whined past his head. Andrew. Diana's voice, somewhere in the chaos. Get to Zoe. He crawled along the floor, following the wall toward where Tony had indicated room 237. Behind him, the gunfight continued. Short, controlled bursts from Diana and Tony, wild spraying from Marcus's men. Andrew reached a doorway and fumbled for the handle. Locked. Zoe, he called out. It's Uncle Andrew. In here, came her small voice, muffled by the door. Andrew threw his shoulder against the door. It splintered but held. He tried again, and this time the lock gave way. Inside, he found Zoe huddled in a corner with a woman who must be Lisa Martinez, Tony's sister-in-law. The woman was groggy but conscious, her eyes wide with fear. Are you hurt? Andrew asked Zoe, kneeling beside her. She shook her head, but he could see she was trembling. The bad man said he was going to hurt Mama. Your Mama's okay. She's very brave, just like you. Andrew looked around the room. One window, but they were on the second floor. Fire escape access, maybe? The gunfire in the hallway was getting closer. Andrew moved to the window and looked out. The fire escape was there, just a few feet away. But as he fumbled with the window latch, he heard something that made his blood freeze. Diana screaming. Stay here, he told Zoe and Lisa. Lock the door behind me. Don't leave us. Zoe grabbed his arm. Andrew knelt down and looked into her eyes. Those same wise, trusting eyes that had seen something worth saving in him just hours earlier. Zoe, I need you to be brave for just a little longer. Can you do that? She nodded, though her lip was trembling. Good girl. If anyone comes through that door who isn't me, your Mama, or Officer Tony, you climb out that window and down the fire escape. Don't look back, don't wait for anyone. Just run. Andrew kissed her forehead, and stepped back into the hallway. The building had gone silent. No more gunfire, no more shouting. Just an ominous quiet that suggested the battle was over. The question was, who had won? Andrew moved carefully along the wall, stepping over debris and trying to avoid the broken glass scattered across the floor. At the end of the hallway, he could see bodies, at least 3 men in dark clothing, none of them moving. But where were Diana and Tony? Andrew. Marcus's voice drifted from the stairwell. Come join us. I have something that belongs to you. Against every instinct screaming at him to run, Andrew walked toward the voice. Marcus stood at the top of the stairs, and Andrew's heart sank when he saw who he was holding. Diana was on her knees in front of Marcus, blood running from a gash on her forehead. Marcus had one hand tangled in her hair, and a gun pressed to the base of her skull. Tony was slumped against the wall nearby, clutching his shoulder. Alive but wounded. The great Andrew Jones, Marcus said mockingly. Finally ready to take responsibility for your actions? Let her go, Marcus. This is between you and me. No, this is between me and everyone who's ever threatened what I've built. Starting with Detective Washington, continuing with his lovely widow, and ending with you. Marcus pressed the gun harder against Diana's head, and she winced but didn't cry out. Here's what's going to happen, Marcus continued. You're going to transfer every remaining asset you have to my offshore accounts. You're going to sign a confession taking full responsibility for my crimes. And then you're going to put this gun in your mouth and pull the trigger. Andrew felt the walls closing in. Everything he'd tried to do, everyone he'd tried to protect, it was all falling apart. But then Diana looked up at him, and despite the blood, despite the fear, her eyes held something unbreakable. Don't do it, she whispered. Don't let him win. Marcus backhanded her across the face, and something inside Andrew snapped. The reckoning was about to begin. Andrew stared at Marcus holding Diana at gunpoint, his mind racing through impossible calculations. Every option seemed to end with someone he cared about dying. But as he looked into Diana's defiant eyes, he realized she was trying to tell him something. Her gaze flicked briefly to Tony, then back to Andrew. The wounded detective was slowly, carefully reaching for something behind his back. You have 30 seconds to decide, Andrew, Marcus said, pressing the gun harder against Diana's skull. Your life for hers. Seems like a fair trade, considering everything you've cost me. What I've cost you? Andrew took a step closer. Marcus, I made you rich. I gave you everything you wanted. You gave me a front. Marcus screamed, his composure finally cracking. Do you know what I could have built without you? The connections I had to sacrifice because you were too visible, too clean? You were supposed to be temporary, Andrew. A useful tool that I'd discard when I was ready. Another step. Andrew could see Tony's hand moving behind his back. But you got greedy, Marcus continued, his voice becoming manic. Started asking questions about the books, wanting to meet with contractors personally. You were going to ruin everything. So you decided to frame me for your crimes and have me killed. I decided to give you a chance to go out as a hero. Marcus laughed, but it was the sound of a man losing his grip on reality. A tragic suicide, overcome by guilt for his terrible crimes. The families of your victims would have had closure. The media would have had their villain. Everyone wins. Everyone except the people you murdered. Casualties of progress, Marcus spat. You think those trafficking victims would have had better lives in whatever hellholes they came from. At least they served a purpose. Diana made a sound of disgust, and Marcus yanked her hair back viciously. That's when Andrew saw it. Tony had managed to pull a backup weapon from an ankle holster. The detective was waiting for the right moment, but he was losing blood and his hands were shaking. You know what your biggest mistake was, Marcus? Andrew said, taking another step. Enlighten me. You underestimated a 6-year-old girl. Marcus frowned, confused. What are you talking about? Zoe Washington. When she paid for my drink today, she didn't just save me from embarrassment. She reminded me of something I'd forgotten. That good people help each other, even when it costs them something. Touching, but hardly relevant to. She's live streaming this conversation. Marcus went very still. What? Andrew held up his phone, showing the recording app that was still running. Remember the phone call I made while we were talking? I didn't just record your confession. I connected the call to Zoe's phone in the other room. She's been broadcasting everything to my social media accounts for the past 20 minutes. It was a desperate bluff, but Andrew sold it with everything he had. That's impossible, Marcus said, but uncertainty crept into his voice. Is it? You taught me to always have backup plans, Marcus. Insurance policies. Andrew's voice grew stronger. Right now, thousands of people are watching Marcus Whitfield hold an innocent woman at gunpoint while confessing to human trafficking and murder. Marcus's face went white. You're lying. Check your phone. Look at the trending topics on Twitter. Hashtag Marcus Whitfield evil. Hashtag Justice for James Washington. Hashtag Andrew Jones innocent. Of course, none of that was true. But Andrew was counting on Marcus's paranoia to do the rest. Marcus fumbled for his phone with his free hand. And in that moment of distraction, several things happened at once. Tony raised his backup weapon. Diana drove her elbow back into Marcus's ribs. Andrew lunged forward. And somewhere in the building, a window exploded inward as heavily armed figures rappelled through the glass. FBI! Everybody down! The hallway erupted in chaos. Marcus stumbled backward, losing his grip on Diana as federal agents swarmed the building. Tony's shot went wide, sparking off the ceiling. Andrew tackled Marcus around the waist, both men crashing to the floor. It's over, Marcus. Andrew shouted over the sound of boots pounding on stairs and agents shouting commands. But Marcus wasn't finished. As they wrestled on the floor, he managed to get his gun pointed at Andrew's chest. If I'm going down, Marcus panted, I'm taking you with me. Andrew saw the finger tighten on the trigger and knew he was about to die. The gunshot was deafening in the confined space. But it wasn't Marcus's gun that fired. Diana stood over them, Tony's backup weapon smoking in her hands, her face grim with satisfaction. That's for my husband, she said quietly. Marcus Whitfield lay still, his eyes staring at nothing. Federal agents were everywhere now, securing the scene, checking for wounded. Agent Sarah Chun, Detective Washington's FBI contact, knelt beside Andrew as paramedics worked on Tony. Mr. Jones, are you injured? Andrew shook his head, still in shock. Zoe, the little girl. Room 237. Is she safe? She's fine. We have her and Ms. Martinez in protective custody. Agent Chin helped Andrew to his feet. Mr. Jones, I need you to know, we've been monitoring this situation for weeks. Detective Washington's evidence reached us before he died, but we needed corroboration. Tonight's recording gave us everything we needed. So the live stream thing wasn't actually. Oh, it was real, Agent Chin said with a slight smile. Ms. Washington managed to connect your phone to the building's emergency PA system. Every word of Marcus's confession was broadcast to our surveillance team outside. Andrew looked at Diana in amazement. How did you? James taught me a few things about electronics before he died, Diana said, accepting a medical kit from one of the paramedics. He said you never knew when technical knowledge might save your life. As the immediate chaos subsided, Agent Chen pulled Andrew aside. There's something else you need to know. We've been unraveling Marcus's network for the past few hours. The scope of his operation was even larger than Detective Washington realized. Trafficking routes through 17 states, corruption reaching into federal agencies, and financial crimes totaling over $200 million. Andrew felt dizzy. How much of that money was mine? According to our forensic accountants, about $40 million was legitimately yours. The rest was stolen, laundered, or obtained through illegal activities. Agent Chen paused. Mr. Jones, you're going to be tied up in legal proceedings for months, maybe years. But preliminary evidence strongly suggests you were an unwitting victim, not a co-conspirator. What about the families? The people who were hurt by my company's operations? That's going to be complicated. Civil lawsuits are inevitable. But Agent Chen looked thoughtful. If you were serious about making amends, there are ways to do that. Andrew nodded. Whatever it takes. As paramedics finished treating the wounded and agents continued processing the scene, Andrew found himself standing beside Diana in the hallway where, just minutes earlier, they'd both thought they were going to die. I need to see Zoe, Diana said quietly. Of course. Andrew paused. Diana, I want you to know. Andrew. She turned to face him, and he was struck again by the strength in her eyes. We have a lot to talk about. About James's investigation, about what happens next, about how we help the families Marcus destroyed. But right now, I just want to hold my daughter. Andrew understood. There would be time for everything else later. Right now, what mattered was that they were all alive, and the truth was finally coming to light. As they walked toward room 237, Andrew's phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Uncle Andrew, Mama said you were very brave tonight. Thank you for keeping us safe. Zoe. Andrew smiled, realizing that somehow, in the space of 12 hours, he'd gone from a man who had everything and felt empty to a man who had almost nothing and felt hope. The reckoning was far from over. There would be trials, investigations, civil suits, and years of work to undo the damage Marcus had caused. But for the first time in longer than he could remember, Andrew Jones was ready to face the consequences of his choices. And more importantly, he was ready to make better ones. 3 months later, the morning sun streamed through the windows of the small conference room at the federal building, illuminating stacks of documents that represented the dismantling of Marcus Whitfield's criminal empire. Andrew sat across from Agent Chen, his lawyer, and representatives from the Justice Department, looking like a man who'd aged years in the span of a season. The final audit is complete, Agent Chen announced, sliding a thick folder across the table. Of your total assets, approximately $42 million were legitimately earned through your construction business. The remainder, nearly $80 million, was proceeds from illegal activities that Marcus conducted using your company as a front. Andrew's lawyer leaned forward. And my client's legal status? No criminal charges will be filed against Mr. Jones. The evidence clearly shows he was manipulated and deceived, not complicit. Agent Chen's expression softened slightly. However, the civil implications are extensive. 17 families have filed lawsuits seeking damages for the deaths and disappearances of loved ones. The total claimed damages exceed $200 million. Andrew had expected this. He'd been preparing for it ever since that night at the warehouse. I want to settle, he said quietly. All of them. Whatever they're asking for. His lawyer looked alarmed. Andrew, you don't have anywhere near that kind of money. Even if you liquidate everything. Then I'll liquidate everything. Andrew's voice was firm. The house, the cars, the company, all of it. Whatever I can't pay immediately, I'll work out payment plans for. Agent Chen studied him carefully. Mr. Jones, that would leave you essentially penniless. Good, Andrew said, and he meant it. Every dollar I earned while Marcus was destroying lives is tainted. I want it all to go to the people who were hurt. After the meeting, Andrew walked out into the crisp autumn air and found Diana waiting for him on the courthouse steps. She wore a simple blue dress and held a manila folder that he recognized. More of James's investigation files that kept surfacing as the case expanded. "How did it go?" she asked. "Exactly as expected. I'm officially broke." Andrew managed a weak smile. "How does it feel to be friends with a man who just gave away everything he owned?" "Like I'm finally seeing who you really are," Diana said softly. They walked together toward the parking garage, their footsteps echoing in the concrete space. Over the past 3 months, they'd spent countless hours together, testifying, meeting with victims' families, working with federal prosecutors to ensure Marcus's network was completely dismantled. "Diana," Andrew said as they reached her car, "there's something I need to tell you." She turned to face him, and he saw something in her expression that made his heart race. "The Riverside Project," he continued. "I've been going through Marcus's files, and I found something. Your husband, James, he wasn't just investigating the trafficking. He discovered that Marcus was planning to expand the operation. There were going to be 5 more developments, all using the same tactics." Diana's face grew pale. How many people would have? Thousands. James's death wasn't just about covering up past crimes. It was about protecting future ones. Andrew pulled out his own folder, but he left detailed notes about how to stop it. Names, bank accounts, shipping routes, everything needed to save those people. Diana took the folder with trembling hands. "James was always 3 steps ahead," she whispered. "Even after death, he was still protecting people. He was protecting you and Zoe too. There are instructions in there. If anything happened to him, you were supposed to get this information to Agent Chen. He knew Marcus might come after his family." Tears were streaming down Diana's face now. He knew he was going to die. Andrew moved closer, his hand hovering near her shoulder, unsure if comfort would be welcome. "Diana, James died believing that good people would finish what he started. He was right." She looked up at him, her eyes bright with unshed tears. "Andrew, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest. Anything. Why are you really doing all this? The settlements, giving away your money, working 18-hour days to help the victims' families. Is it guilt, or is it something else?" Andrew considered the question carefully. 3 months ago, he would have given her some polished answer about corporate responsibility and doing the right thing. But standing here with this woman who'd lost everything to his willful blindness and still chose to help him find redemption, he could only tell the truth. "It started as guilt," he admitted. "But somewhere along the way, it became about trying to be worthy of the faith a 6-year-old girl showed me. And," he paused, gathering courage, "it became about trying to be worthy of you." Diana's breath caught. "Andrew, I know it's complicated. I know I'm the last person you should trust. But Diana, these past 3 months, working beside you, seeing your strength and grace, I've fallen in love with you. With both of you." Before Diana could respond, a small voice called out from across the parking garage. "Uncle Andrew." "Mama." Zoe came running toward them, her backpack bouncing as she ran. Behind her, at a more sedate pace, came Ernest from the corner store, who'd been watching Zoe while Diana attended the courthouse meetings. "How's my brave girl?" Andrew asked, scooping Zoe up in his arms. "Mr. Ernest taught me how to count change," Zoe announced proudly. "And he said you've been helping lots of families, just like Daddy did." Andrew met Ernest's eyes over Zoe's head. The old man nodded approvingly. "Your Uncle Andrew is learning what it means to be a good man," Ernest said. "Just took him a while to remember." Diana watched this interaction with an expression Andrew couldn't read. When Ernest and Zoe moved ahead to give them privacy, she finally spoke. Andrew, I need you to understand something. James was the love of my life. I don't know if I'll ever be ready for something new. Andrew's heart sank, but he nodded. I understand. But, Diana continued, I also need you to understand that watching you choose to do the right thing, even when it cost you everything, it's made me see you differently. Hope flickered in Andrew's chest. I'm not ready for promises or grand gestures, Diana said. But maybe we could start with dinner sometime. Just the three of us. Andrew felt like he could breathe again. I'd like that. Though I should warn you, my budget for fancy restaurants has gotten significantly smaller. Diana laughed, the first truly joyful sound he'd heard from her. Good thing I know how to cook. As they walked toward the car, Zoe slipped her small hand into Andrew's. Uncle Andrew, are you going to be poor now like we are? I suppose I am, sweetheart. Zoe considered this seriously. That's okay. Mama says being poor just means you have to be more creative about being happy. Andrew looked at Diana, who was smiling despite the tears still glistening in her eyes. Your mama is a very wise woman, he said. That evening, as they sat around Diana's modest kitchen table sharing a home-cooked meal, Andrew felt something he hadn't experienced in years. Contentment. Not the hollow satisfaction of a successful deal, or the temporary high of accumulating wealth, but genuine happiness. Zoe was telling them about her day at school, her face animated as she described an art project about community helpers. Diana listened with the patient attention of a mother who knew these moments were precious. And Andrew sat there, officially broke, but surrounded by more wealth than he'd ever possessed in his corporate tower. His phone buzzed with a message from Agent Chen. Final count. Marcus's network trafficked over 400 people in 5 years. Your testimony and evidence have led to 23 arrests across 8 states. You saved lives, Andrew. James Washington would be proud. Andrew showed the message to Diana, who read it with quiet satisfaction. He would be, she agreed. And so would my parents, if they were still alive. They always said the measure of a man isn't what he builds, but what he's willing to tear down when he realizes it's wrong. Later, after Zoe had gone to bed, Andrew and Diana sat on her small front porch, watching the stars emerge in the clear night sky. What happens now? Andrew asked. Now we keep doing the work, Diana said. There are still families who need help, still parts of Marcus's network that need to be dismantled. Agent Chen thinks the investigation will continue for at least another year. And after that? Diana was quiet for a long moment. After that, we see what kind of life we can build from the pieces that are left. Andrew nodded, understanding that this was as much of a promise as either of them was ready to make. As he prepared to leave, he'd been staying in a modest apartment across town. Diana caught his arm. Andrew? Thank you. For what? For proving that redemption is possible. For showing Zoe that even when adults make terrible mistakes, they can still choose to make them right. Andrew kissed her hand gently, a gesture that felt both old-fashioned and perfectly natural. Thank you for showing me what's worth fighting for. 1 year later, Andrew knelt between rows of tomatoes and peppers, his hands dirty from honest work, helping Mrs. Rodriguez tend to the vegetables that would feed dozens of families in the neighborhood. Mr. Andrew, she said in her heavily accented English, you sure you don't mind getting your nice clothes dirty? Andrew looked down at his simple jeans and work shirt, a far cry from the tailored suits that had once defined him. These aren't nice clothes, Mrs. Rodriguez. They're work clothes. There's a difference. She laughed, the sound bright in the morning air. You have learned much this year, yes? I'm still learning, Andrew admitted. It had been exactly 13 months since that night at the warehouse. 13 months since Marcus Whitfield's criminal empire had collapsed. 13 months since Andrew Jones had chosen to give away everything he owned to help the families his former partner had destroyed. The legal battles were finally over. The last of the civil settlements had been paid just 2 weeks ago, leaving Andrew with exactly $3,847 in his bank account and a freedom he'd never known as a wealthy man. He now worked as a project coordinator for a non-profit organization that helped trafficking victims rebuild their lives. A job that paid enough for a modest apartment and simple meals, and provided more satisfaction than any million-dollar deal ever had. His phone buzzed with a text from Diana. "Dinner at 6? Zoe has something special to show you." Andrew smiled, finishing his work in the garden before heading to the small office where he spent his afternoons. The Riverside Recovery Foundation occupied a converted storefront in the heart of the neighborhood, its walls covered with thank-you letters from families they'd helped and photos of survivors who'd found new lives. "Andrew," Agent Chen called from the reception area as he walked in. "Perfect timing. I have news." Sarah Chen had become a friend over the past year, checking in regularly as the investigation into Marcus's network continued to uncover new victims and new evidence. "Good news or complicated news?" Andrew asked, hanging up his jacket. "Both. We've identified the location of 17 people who were trafficked through Marcus's operation and are still alive. They're in 3 different countries, but we've got cooperation from international authorities to bring them home." Andrew felt the familiar mix of joy and heartbreak that came with every rescue. Joy for the lives saved, heartbreak for the time lost and trauma endured. "That's wonderful. What's the complicated part?" "Some of them have children now, born in captivity. The repatriation process is going to be complex, and they'll need extensive support when they get back." Agent Chen paused. "Your foundation has been requested specifically to handle their reintegration." Andrew felt the weight of responsibility settle on his shoulders. Not the crushing burden it once would have been, but the purposeful weight of meaningful work. "We'll be ready," he said. "I know you will be." "Andrew." Agent Chen's expression grew more personal. "I want you to know, James Washington's widow speaks very highly of your work. She says her husband would be proud of who you've become." The mention of Diana made Andrew's heart quicken, as it had every day for the past year. Their relationship had developed slowly, carefully, built on a foundation of shared purpose and mutual respect. There had been dinners together, walks in the park with Zoe, quiet evenings talking about everything and nothing. But they hadn't spoken of love again. Not since that day in the parking garage, when Diana had asked for time. Andrew spent the afternoon reviewing files and coordinating with other agencies, but his mind kept drifting to the evening ahead. Zoe's something special could be anything from a new drawing to a school project, but whatever it was, he looked forward to seeing her bright smile and hearing her infectious laughter. At 6 o'clock sharp, Andrew knocked on the door of the small house that Diana had managed to buy with her portion of the Victim Compensation Fund. It wasn't much, a 2-bedroom cottage with a tiny yard, but it was theirs, and it radiated the warmth that only comes from being truly loved. "Uncle Andrew." Zoe launched herself into his arms as soon as the door opened. She was 7 now, taller and more confident, but still the same bright spirit who'd saved his soul with a crumpled $5 bill. "Hey, sweetheart. Your mom says you have something special to show me." Zoe nodded enthusiastically and grabbed his hand, pulling him toward the living room. "Close your eyes." Andrew obediently shut his eyes as Zoe led him forward. He could hear Diana laughing softly from the kitchen, could smell the aroma of her famous pot roast filling the small house. Okay, open them. Andrew opened his eyes and froze. The living room had been transformed. Candles flickered on every surface, soft music played from a small speaker, and in the center of it all was a small table set for three, with flowers and Diana's best dishes. But what took his breath away wasn't the romantic setting. It was the picture Zoe held up proudly. It was a drawing of three figures holding hands in front of a house. A tall man, a woman, and a little girl. At the top, in Zoe's careful 7-year-old handwriting, were the words, "My family. Do you like it?" Zoe asked eagerly. Andrew's throat felt tight. "It's the most beautiful thing I've ever seen." "Zoe," Diana called from the kitchen, "why don't you wash your hands for dinner?" As Zoe skipped away, Diana emerged from the kitchen wearing a simple yellow dress that made her look radiant. Her hair was down, framing her face in soft waves, and her eyes held something Andrew had been hoping to see for months. "Diana," he said softly, "what is all this?" She moved closer, close enough that he could catch the subtle scent of her perfume. "It's me finally being ready to answer the question you asked a year ago." Andrew's heart began to race. "And what's your answer?" Instead of speaking, Diana reached up and touched his face gently, her thumb tracing the line of his jaw. Then she stood on her tiptoes and kissed him, soft, sweet, and full of promise. When they broke apart, Andrew rested his forehead against hers. "I love you," he whispered. "Both of you. I've loved you both for so long." "I love you too," Diana whispered back. "I think I have for months, but I was scared. Scared of betraying James's memory, scared of trusting someone new with our hearts. And now," Diana smiled, and it was like watching the sun rise. "Now I know that James would want Zoe to have a father figure who loves her like his own. And he'd want me to be happy. And Andrew," she paused, her voice growing emotional, "you make us both so happy. Uncle Andrew." "Mama," Zoe called from the kitchen, "are you going to kiss all night, or are we going to eat dinner?" They broke apart laughing, and Andrew marveled at how natural it felt to be part of this family, how right it seemed to belong here. Over dinner, as Zoe chatted about school and her friends, Andrew found himself studying Diana's face in the candlelight. This woman who'd lost so much, who'd had every reason to hate him, had instead chosen to help him find redemption. She'd taught him that love wasn't about grand gestures or expensive gifts. It was about showing up every day, being present for the people who mattered. "Andrew," Diana said, interrupting his thoughts, "there's something else." She reached under her chair and pulled out an envelope. "This came for you today." Agent Chen dropped it off. Andrew recognized the official seal of the Department of Justice. His stomach clenched. After a year of legal victories, he'd learned to be wary of official correspondence. "Should I open it now?" he asked. "Yes," Zoe said firmly. "We're family now. No more secrets." Andrew smiled at her matter-of-fact declaration and opened the envelope. As he read, his expression shifted from concern to amazement to something approaching awe. "What is it?" Diana asked. It's a commendation from the Attorney General for exceptional civilian assistance in dismantling a major human trafficking operation." Andrew looked up, his eyes bright with tears. "But that's not the important part." "What's the important part?" "They're offering me a position. A real job with the Justice Department's Human Trafficking Task Force. Full federal benefits, relocation assistance." Andrew's voice trailed off as the implications sank in. Diana was very quiet. "That's a wonderful opportunity." "It is," Andrew agreed. "But it would mean moving to Washington, leaving all this behind." The silence stretched between them, heavy with possibility and uncertainty. "Would you want me to take it?" Andrew asked. Diana looked at Zoe, who was listening with the serious attention that children bring to adult conversations that might affect their lives. What do you think, baby? Diana asked her daughter. Should Uncle Andrew take this important job? Zoe considered the question with 7-year-old gravity. Would he still be part of our family? That depends, Diana said, looking at Andrew with eyes full of hope and fear. Andrew, what do you want? Andrew set the letter aside and reached across the table to take both their hands. I want to marry your mother, he said, looking at Zoe with complete seriousness. I want to adopt you as my daughter, if you'll have me. And I want us all to go to Washington together, as a family, so I can keep helping people while we build a life together. Zoe's face lit up like Christmas morning. Really? You want to be my daddy? More than anything in the world, sweetheart. Zoe launched herself out of her chair and into Andrew's lap, hugging him fiercely. Over her head, Andrew met Diana's eyes. Is that a yes? He asked softly. Diana was crying now, but they were tears of joy. That's definitely a yes. Later that evening, after Zoe had gone to bed clutching her drawing and chattering excitedly about being a family, Andrew and Diana sat on the front porch swing, wrapped in each other's arms. James would approve, Diana said quietly, her head resting on Andrew's shoulder. How can you be sure? Because he wrote something in his final report that I never told you. Diana pulled out a folded piece of paper from her pocket. He said that Andrew Jones was a man capable of great good if someone could help him remember his humanity. He said you reminded him of himself when he was younger, ambitious but fundamentally decent. Andrew took the paper with shaking hands, reading James Washington's final assessment of his character. At the bottom, in the detective's careful handwriting, was a note dated the day before his death. If something happens to me, I hope Diana will consider that good men can change, and that Zoe deserves to see what redemption looks like. Andrew Jones could be that example, if given the chance. He was giving us his blessing, Diana whispered. Even then, he was thinking about our future. Andrew folded the letter carefully, understanding that he would treasure it for the rest of his life. Diana, he said, I know I can't replace James. I don't want to, but I promise you, I'll spend the rest of my life trying to be worthy of this family. You already are, Diana said, turning in his arms to look at him directly. You gave up everything to help strangers. You chose justice over profit, truth over comfort. Andrew, you're not the same man whose credit card was declined in that store. No, Andrew agreed, thinking of everything that had brought them to this moment. I'm not. As they sat together under the stars, Andrew reflected on the journey that had brought him here. 1.5 years ago, he'd been a wealthy man who felt empty. Tonight, he was a man with almost no money who felt richer than he'd ever imagined possible. What do you think was Andrew's greatest victory? Saving the trafficking victims, winning Diana's love, or becoming the father Zoe deserved? Let me know your final thoughts. His phone buzzed with a message from Ernest at the corner store. Saw the news about your engagement on Mrs. Rodriguez's Facebook. Congratulations, son. You've become the man that little girl always saw in you. Andrew showed the message to Diana, who smiled. Ernest's right, you know. Zoe saw your potential before any of us did. She saved my life, Andrew said. In every way that matters. And now you get to spend the rest of your life saving others. Andrew kissed the top of Diana's head, breathing in the scent of her hair and the promise of their future together. We get to spend the rest of our lives saving others, he corrected. Together. Inside the house, they could hear Zoe talking in her sleep, probably dreaming about their new life as a family. Tomorrow, there would be wedding plans to make, adoption papers to file, and a cross-country move to coordinate. There would be new victims to help, new cases to solve, and new challenges to face. But tonight, Andrew Jones, former billionaire, recovering fool, and future husband and father, was exactly where he belonged. In the arms of a woman who'd taught him what love really meant, in a home filled with the laughter of a little girl who'd shown him that kindness could change the world, one small act at a time. The reckoning was complete. The love was just beginning.